I'm sure at this point most people know about High on Life. It was released in December 2022, published by Squanch Games, whose CEO is Justin Roiland, creator of Rick and Morty. You either love or hate Rick and Morty and most other shows done by Justin. I did watch Rick and Morty for the first couple of seasons, but I quickly grew bored of its humor and the long waits between the seasons. I knew High on Life would be very much of the same line of comedy and writing style of his shows. Just based on the other games and from what I'd seen, I knew what I was getting myself into. Time spent with the game is short, luckily, as I found just as I was getting annoyed or irritated by certain characters, it was finally over.
My brother told me Douglas is really into torture.
Like, sexually?
Does it matter?
Yes, to me it needs to be sexual.
Why are you telling me this? I barely know you.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, just sort of spilled out. Well, now you know. Do with it what you will.
I'm not doing anything with it.
Gameplay in High on Life plays like your typical modern Doom-style shooter, right down to the glory kills. If you played a modern shooter, you won't find much you haven't seen elsewhere. That's not to say it's a bad thing. I find the generous aim assist and the laid-back nature of the game to be quite enjoyable. By its design, it's a relatively easy game. If you're looking for a challenge, I recommend kicking up the difficulty for sure. The premise of the game is that you find aliens, Gatlians, and they are weapons by nature. You first find Kenny, and he's your basic pistol, with a pretty useless secondary glob shot. He's easily the worst gun in the game, I think. Throughout your course, you'll meet Gus the shotgun, Sweezy the rapid-fire /sniper, and Creature the I don't know what to call gun. He spawns little minions that eats away at the enemies, kind of like a grenade launcher almost.
I think I'm gonna be sick. Oh hey, you look nice. My name's Creature. The bad guys did experiments on me and fucked me up real bad in basically every way you can imagine.
Holy shit, am I glad to see another Gatlian alive in here. Are there any others?
Oh my god, yes! There's so many! Oh, but unless you've been alive, then...
My favorite and I think most useful guns were Sweezy and Gus. Each gun has their own unique secondary fire, which is also used for platforming and puzzle solving in certain cases. In combat, these secondary fires are cooldown based, or they can be replenished via power-up. You're also joined by Knifey, who is exactly what his name implies. He is the most deranged of the group for sure. Eventually you get a Doom-style dash, which can be upgraded further, as well you'll get a pretty useful jetpack. Enemies are pretty bog standard. They're gooped up aliens which range from snipers, fodder, and heavy enemies. None of them really offered a true challenge. The most dangerous would be the rushing aliens, but they are easily beaten with secondary skills. Boss fights can be slightly unique, but again, they offer little challenge. I think I died most in the brothers fight just because I was doing something wrong. But even then, over the course of my time in the game, I think I died less than 10 times. Again, if you want any sort of challenge, up the difficulty. Controls felt tight otherwise. I was actually pretty impressed with how well the locomotion and gunplay felt. I never felt like I was fighting with all, and it was very controller-friendly FPS, which I found quite refreshing.
Oh, you beat me, you son of a bitch! True form! Assemble!
My time spent with High on Life, performance was hit and miss. First I used the default settings, which were all low except mesh and texture quality were set to very high. In the opening of the game, you are playing a console game as a character, and the graphics are more basic. I immediately noticed the terrible anti-aliasing. I immediately turned this up to high, and this area was not a good portion to benchmark, but even still I had moments of the game dropping from 40 FPS down to the low 30s. I played with settings until I was able to find a heavy GPU usage area. That's when I found this glob waterfall. Hammers the GPU pretty hard. And these are the settings that I found to work best.
This is the only reason...
Even with these settings though, there are just areas that hit the deck hard, particularly with transition areas like the tunnel leading to the slums, or in harder, heavier combat areas. Mostly though, you'll have a stable-ish 30 to 40 FPS range, with it being closer to the high 30s to 40 most of the time. I also played with TDP controls, as this game can be quite the battery drain at times. I found that putting the deck's TDP to 12 watts, it would offer almost identical performance. Drops were still had, and the range at which it dropped was a touch worse, but I was able to play the game the rest of the way through once I settled on these settings. I did try dropping it to 10 watts, but the performance hit was too harsh. If you're to lock the screen to 30 Hz of my settings, you can get a mostly locked 30, but there are still points of stutter in harder areas to run that'll just cause you to dip below 30. I found the better perceived smoothness at 40 Hz to be more beneficial. Battery life was fairly decent. With my settings, I was able to get just under 3 hours of battery life at 35% screen brightness. Your mileage may vary as some worlds are more lushly designed and in turn use up more power. Wattage can range from 12 watts all the way up to 23 watts. During most stable scenes, usage for me was between 15 to 18 watts though. Even with the stutters and performance drops, I didn't find it to be too intrusive. Gains could be made by lowering settings, but I think there's too great of a hit to visual fidelity for it to be worth it. High on Life is a surprisingly very nice looking game, and I think my settings help accentuate them on the deck. Unfortunately, ghosting can be seen during quick movements or mainly while panning the camera, and this is due to the FSR2. However, I think in motion and during gameplay, you barely notice it. All in all, performance was not 100% amazing, but it was definitely playable on the deck. Likely the thing that will draw you into this game is its story and writing. Knowing the writers, you know what you're getting yourself into.
Scrindle Labs now. Just past the Mushroom Valley here. Just be careful. That place is freaky.
Thanks!
I can't say I cared much for the story, as you play as a young kid whose world is turned upside down when aliens come and invade the Earth. As they warp away, one is left dead, and this is where you find your first Gatlian, Kenny. He's voiced by Justin Roiland, who I know is a very talented voice actor. However, I can't stand the reusing of his Morty character voice style. I know he can do other voices quite well, but I suppose the draw is that Morty is a talking gun. Kenny goops you so that he's able to speak your language, and this is when it reveals that Gargantuous and the G3 cartel have invaded Earth to turn the human race into drugs. After some brief combat, you retrieve a warp disk and you warp your house off Earth and off into an alien planet. Kenny then informs you of a famous bounty hunter, Gene Zaruthian, who lives in the area and asks you to hire him to help us out. Turns out Gene is a washed up bum, and once you offer him your house in the event if you die, Gene offers up his help as well as his bounty hunter suit and his portal/bounty station. This is where you are tasked with bounties, and the first few will offer up new Gatlians for you to have. As mentioned before, you will meet Gus, Sweezy, Creature, and Knifey. There are a lot of environmental and conversation story elements, as well as some side questing involved. There are choices for the player to make in some of the conversations, however they don't offer much of a substantial weight to them. In some gameplay beats you're allowed to kill off NPCs for the sake of progressing further or for comedy. Comedy and foul language comes first and foremost in this game. Every other word is this or that. You will either love it or hate it. This is definitely not a kid-friendly game. I did find some elements of the story to be interesting, but what was most interesting to me was the references to pop culture or other video games. Even Applebee's is referenced. However, I feel some references are just beaten too far. One boss fight, he mentioned he was going for a Psycho Mantis vibe. This was hilarious to me as I love Metal Gear Solid. However, it was quickly overdone and ended with the boss calling out that it was a Metal Gear Solid reference. I feel like this cheapened the laugh for me, and I believe it would still go over most people's heads even if they were told it was MGS. I'm sure there are plenty of things that completely went over my head that others found hilarious. Either way, the story is there. It's not groundbreaking by any means. Where the enjoyment will come from is the banter between the guns and the random conversations that you can have around on the planets. Some of the stuff said has ranged from pretty smart to downright crass. I did find myself chuckling quite a few times while playing, though. In conclusion, should you play High on Life? If you like Rick and Morty or other shows along those lines, you'll likely enjoy High on Life. Should you play High on Life on the Steam Deck? I think the Steam Deck is a fine way to play high in life. Everything worked as expected, save for some stuttering and moments of performance drops. However, overall I would say High on Life is almost perfect candidate for Steam Deck. Its more laid-back nature was perfect for a casual gaming device like the Steam Deck. I found myself drawn to playing on the Steam Deck because I could play it while watching a show with my wife or watching videos on YouTube or whatever else. This game doesn't demand your utmost attention, and I think a game would likely be more enjoyable if you're high on your own something as well. But that's all for this video, and I hope you have a great day.
Say that it's totally fine if you don't like using me. I don't feel emotions very well, so it doesn't hurt. It does kind of tickle for some reason, though.